This morning's Dharma talk is titled Free and Well-Favored, and is from the traditional teaching called the Four Reminders, which turn the mind towards the Dharma or towards the truth. And the first reminder is, first, contemplate the preciousness of being free and well-favored, difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. A very simple little slogan. There's three more. I'm not going to go into those today, but free and well-favored. First, contemplate the preciousness, the fundamental value of free. Freedom is kind of relative, of course. You can't fly yet. We're probably all working on it in your dreams. But we have quite a bit of freedom, mobility, especially in this country so far. Things don't look real good, as you know. But we're free. We're free to be here. We're free not to be here. Free to be somewhere else. We're well-favored. The way I like to talk about well-favored is you're born with a mind that is open enough, is not particularly fixated, so that you could actually even hear a teaching like this. This is quite a bit different than something that is being promoted from the point of view of trying to get you to believe in something or disbelieve in it. If you've listened to me much, you hear me talk about that all the time. Don't believe, don't disbelieve, don't ignore. That's the middle way. You're just here, you're just present. Anytime anything arises, just watch the way, and this is not to condemn you or anything, but just watch the way that we just can't resist but comment on it. Plus, minus, neutral. We're always, in the process of awareness, if you do a lot of sitting practice, the sitting practice itself may be entertaining, it may be boring, it may be exhausting, just depending on your own karma, your own causes and conditions. You will have quite a bit of a different experience than the person next to you or the other person that you're engaged with, talking to. Friends, sangha, community of meditators. So Cody and I were hanging out this morning talking about the Declaration of Independence. Remember that? John Locke, yeah. We were saying that. Well, he was saying it. I don't have that good a memory, but we were saying how Thomas Jefferson changed what John Locke said. John Locke said life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, which is actually what we do. But Jefferson changed it, even though he owned 100 people, changed it to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, except for the people he owned. They couldn't pursue happiness. So, kind of a sad situation. So it's a little bit different what we're talking about here. It has a mundane or ordinary quality to it. Of course it does. We want to do well. We want to live. We want to eat, sleep, take care of our people that we care about, our close friends, relatives, distant friends. We want to prosper, get along okay. And so the Buddhist teaching goes a little further. It kind of lifts off, or it's kind of an anti-gravity machine, if you would. It's kind of a way of releasing, not letting go necessarily, not deliberately letting go, which is aggressive, but actually watching how the consciousness, the awareness, who you actually are, your deep consciousness, actually is not as attached to this cause and effect world, the success and failure world, the 8 worldly dharmas of I'm getting it, I'm not getting it, it's coming, it's going, and so on. All the polarities we all know about success and failure. Praise and blame. So we're free to be here. We're well-favored in that we aren't so clogged up, that we can actually hear something that might actually help us release our grip on this as some kind of solid thing that we can, some kind of safety situation we can cling. We cling to our body, we protect ourselves, we protect our reputation. And that whole protection, I'm not saying there's something wrong with that particularly, but the way in which we go about doing that tends to solidify or cause a kind of fixation, solidification, grasping at the center of our identity that is about protecting ourselves. It can be very subtle. Even someone who is quite happy all the time seems to be quite uplifted and cheerful. If they come into any kind of threatening situation, then you find out what's happening, on the lower levels in the basement, in the foundation, and see if that consciousness of whoever they are, if they've actually got to know themselves, or if they've avoided certain things. If you can avoid things for 40, 50, 60, 70 weeks, months, years, you can avoid, and you can do it by distraction. Well, I'm doing this. Well, I'm getting my graduate degree, or I'm working on, and I'm in this job, and I have this kind of busyness, this kind of thing that I have to do. I have to do this. I have to make a living. Sometimes I just recently had someone ask about, how do I know I need to do a retreat. How do I do that? Have, relationships, job, and everything. And I say, as it says in the first reminder, first contemplate the preciousness of being free and well favored. Difficult to gain. We don't know how we got here. If you do, I'd like to hear about it in private, so we can patent it. Free and well favored. As I said, already commented on that. Difficult to gain, easy to lose. We know about that one. And now I must do something meaningful. And the meaningful part for us, if you want to receive this message, it's not propaganda particularly. It's just based on, I've been looking at something for a long time. Here I am, and you're here. So for this short period of time, you're kind of giving me permission to say stuff, and that's what I intend to do. If nobody shows up, I stay home. I wouldn't necessarily go out and try to drum up listeners. It may look like that, but this has come about very slowly. This has taken a long, long time for this to happen. And it was a lot of time was just sitting still, looking at how crazy I am. And not fighting with it. Difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. Meaningful, is the way I say this, is train your mind. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to join Buddhism. There are a lot of Buddhists that feel like, well, there's only one way to do this. You have to study this, you have to study this, you have to get this empowerment from this Lama, or you have to study under this Zen master. You don't have to study under anybody. I'm here to tell you that as somebody who's studied under people. I think it helps, but you don't have to. What you do have to do, or not, do whatever you want to do. Free and well favored. You're free to continue to churn up more and more samsara, life after life after life. I'm not saying you've ever had a past life. I'm not even saying you're having this one. Train your mind, find out who you are. Now I must do something meaningful. That's probably the most important part of that. What is fundamentally meaningful to you? It might be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, like it says in the Declaration of Independence. The American dream is extremely materialistic. And the American dream is just kind of just something to chat about. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we're not saying that it's not about happiness. Of course it is. We want to be, all beings want to be happy. We all want to be happy. But the way we go about it is to project onto what something is, the happiness part, and then project onto what the barrier is, and then we busy ourselves trying to get around or remove or dissolve the barrier. And big corporations take advantage of you doing that, and will just market the daylights out of you, especially if you have a smartphone. Which, is there anybody in here that doesn't have a smartphone other than Shazan? Is he the only Luddite? You're a Luddite. That's another, you all heard about Luddites. That's an ancient lineage of Buddhism.
I have one, but it's disabled.
That's even better, or worse. Yeah, you guys use the same phone.
No, we have two phones now.
Oh, you do have two?
Yeah, so now I don't get any phone calls.
Or share your number.
That's very good. I really have thought, I'm sure everybody has, about just sometimes it gets so very aggravating. But we're all kind of tied into it and addicted to it. So We should, as I say about everything, include. And no matter how bad something gets, try to find a way to include everything. Don't exclude. Exclusion is probably about trying to make some kind of artificial happiness. And it just doesn't last. There's the pleasure kind, and then there's the, as we were listening to on this thing that one of my sons sent us. What was the differentiation between it was like I do with the nerve endings and that kind of thing, but I can't remember how he phrased it.
Pleasure and happiness.
Yeah, he was differentiating between pleasure, which is you get addicted to, you can, and happiness, which is doesn't have the same kind of ground. So happiness from the point of view of Buddhism is no self, no other. It's seeing the fundamental nature. You don't have to make peace, just stop making war. You don't have to stop making war. Just see that you make war. If you see that you make war, it will settle itself. It will. There isn't any personality or identity there to do anything about it. If there is, then there's some kind of ignorance going on, and there's some kind of passion, aggression. There's some kind of three poisons are operating in some way to get something else to happen. The second noble truth of the Buddha is wanting things to be different than they are. There's difficulty, discomfort, dissatisfaction, but we don't like it. And we're not saying you should like it. We're saying that when you sit down, when you meditate, when you step off of your cushion and go into your everyday life, don't object, don't agree, don't look away. So whatever's happening, insofar as you can, don't go along with it necessarily. Don't necessarily agree with it, but also don't shut down on it based on your preconceptions. Watch the way when something occurs that you project onto it. We all do it all the time. How do I know about it? I do it every day, every morning, every noon, every night. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, set my alarm just deliberately to wake up and project on stuff. But it's about, as I say over and over again, it's about awareness. If you could just find that other gear, whatever it is, that it's about the awareness, you could say it's neutral. And it's not about going forward, going backward, or shutting off the engine. It's just about the awareness, and it's just about including. And this is the beginning of your discovery of not only of wisdom, the wisdom mind, but also compassion. Compassion is not particularly a feeling. It might have qualities around it that have a feeling component. Sometimes they're overwhelming and extremely strong. But compassion itself is just complete emptiness. That doesn't mean the kind of emptiness where the relative kind, where something was there and now it's gone. It is emptiness from the point of view of no separation. It is empty of any kind of separation. It certainly looks separate, doesn't it? Everywhere we look, anything we do, anything we see is flooded with what Buddhism is called the 10,000 things. It's actually 10 million. No, you can't really count it. Did we ever count that yet?
700 billion. 700
billion, yeah. There's 750 billion people on the earth. Nobody's correcting me. That's because nobody's listening. One time I said that similar thing in here, and my son Aaron, who's not here today, of course, but he corrected me immediately. No, they're not. There's only, and then he told me whatever it was, 750 million. I don't really care, and I would like to know who counted those. Yeah. I've done some counting myself, and it takes a long time to get to 100,000. Yes.
So what is the I don't really care? What is that?
When I said I don't really care.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Because recently.
Did I do something wrong?
No, I'm just curious about that. What might we mean by that? We had a illustration of that with the first lady who went down to the border and had on her jacket.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a good point.
I don't really care. So, and I use that phrase.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe just then it's like it's part of what I'm saying. Of course I care about it. I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at it, but I'm saying it's not a priority. So that would be my way. I don't know what was going on with that writing on the back of her thing. That was very odd. I don't know if anyone has ever come up with. Did you? Oh, you have a question? What's your question?
About the 4 reminders.
Yes.
You said something about it's the four reminders that turn the mind towards the Dharma.
Yes.
And mind seems like a pretty ambiguous word, so could you say something about that particular use of mind?
So it turns the mind, or turns the attention, or that area of the consciousness that is on receiving all of your sense fields. There are nerve endings, so to speak, of different kinds, and in your sight and your touch, taste, odor, hearing, and the mind are all receiving. We don't even know that. We know where they come from, where sounds are coming from, or colors, because we can see the object, or we can see the bird chirping, or whatever. But the mind that's a different level. It's a deeper level of consciousness. We don't actually know what it is, but we know what it does. It produces all kinds of. It's kind of odd if you look at it and try to see what a thought is. We have thoughts. We all say, "Well, what are you thinking?" We'll say, "Not much. What are you thinking?" So I was trying to think about what you were thinking, but I can't tell what you're thinking because you're not telling me. So we can go on, and we can go in silly circles about that, but we can't really find a thought. We can't find that something that appears like it doesn't seem to have a front and a back or a middle. And so when we say what Chazon's asking about turns the mind towards the Dharma, the idea there is that we begin to look at the fundamental nature. We take the mind that has been kind of enamored of and fascinated by and seduced by this kind of thought and that kind of thought. And I like it, that's a thought. Oh, I don't like that, I don't care for that. If you talk to anybody or listen to any conversation between two people at Starbucks, you don't have to eavesdrop particularly more than a couple of minutes. And you'll see how we keep this whole thing going, of this illusion that we're separate beings with different ideas and opinions, and we it's kind of a highly polished form of egocentrism. Not bad. I'm not saying that people are terrible, they shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that we very carefully avoid, and we do that avoidance through grasping at things. We do it through rejecting things and shutting down or turning away. And it can be very soft, so you don't really show up as particularly manipulative. But your life's going to end. And it can end today. It could end tomorrow. I mean, it could end, as it says at the end of this situation, and one of the reminders, death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. So train your mind so that you can see what we didn't decide to come here, and now that we're here, and I was saying at the talk yesterday, go look in the mirror and see how much control you've had so far. Like I would have made a lot bigger ears for myself so I could hear better. I would have had a bigger nose. That's all the further I'm going. But we have wishes or hopes, dreams, and aspirations about all kinds of things. And I'm not saying that those are particularly wrong. Just saying that what Chazon's asking about turns the mind towards the Dharma. They actually turn the mind, especially this particular one, but they all do, towards what is fundamentally true and what fundamentally needs to be observed. This isn't to say that you can't leave here and go never meditate. Go do something else. And I sometimes say, don't believe anything I say. If I've said something that is important or is helpful, probably won't forget it. You'll probably reflect on it, or you may dismiss the whole thing out of hand. But turning the mind towards the Dharma the idea there is to find out this is basically, as far as we know, what the Buddha did 2,500 years ago when he saw sickness, aging, and death. He was in his castle, and as the story goes, and I'm sure somebody has fluffed that up a little bit, so it's a little bit more like a, what do they call that? Fiction? Yeah, fiction. So we don't really know what happened, but the way it's presented is he saw sickness, he saw someone who was sick, saw a corpse, and saw someone who was very, very old, and he saw a mendicant or a monk. So he kind of looked at that. This is just the way that it's presented. Who knows what he saw? But he did want to find out what is this. So he left and went off as the story goes, for 6 years, and endeavored to find out what the mind is and who he was and what sickness, aging, and death was and what suffering was. And that's where his teachings come out of. Everything is dependently arisen. He actually saw that there was no solid separate beings anywhere. It just looks like it, and everything in the relative world is cheering that thing on to the point of people can become dictators or mistreat, kill millions of people. And then other people completely dedicate their lives to saving others, to being with others. People are nurses and doctors and occasionally stateswomen are their whole motivation. You just talk to them for a few minutes, and they're all about helping others. They want to help others. It's about others' happiness. There's too, and some people want to help others and just want to be seen as somebody who helps others. So they'll try to act as much as they can so that the people looking at them won't judge them as a bad nurse. You've never been judged as a bad nurse, have you, Jesse? But that kind of profession, usually there's some kind of inspiration to help, just like teachers and other people who do that, who work hard in that area. But if you go into any area without training the mind, without really training and going down and seeing who you are, it's not a matter of coming up with some kind of great enlightened idea. It's not even a matter of being enlightened, particularly. Enlightenment is just it's just kind of an advertisement. So the actual situation is you just see what's true, and it's not particularly a big deal. But if you don't see what's true, and you go out into the world half explored, then you'll do fine unless you run into trouble. But if you run into any trouble, and that could be anything from somebody criticizing you, which makes your defensiveness come up, or complimenting you, which makes your pride kind of swell up. Like, good, I guess I am doing pretty good. People like me. We all know people who are very sensitive to being liked. And then, and it can be so difficult that you go out in an area where you feel you want your conscious motivation is you want peace. You want everyone to stop fighting. But you will go out into an area where there's a lot of aggression going on, and then that starts to rattle. That starts to resonate. It's like the metaphor I've used several times. Is sometimes when the temperature, the humidity is just right, then the drum just has the right tension or the right tone, and you strike that drum. This particular window down here will rattle. None of the other ones rattle. They're all ignoring the drum. But that window is not ignoring the drum. And so it's a similar kind of thing. You could go say, and I'm just using this as an example. You could go somewhere where there's protests or antagonisms or whatever, and if you haven't made peace in yourself, fundamentally, then that hidden aggression, that buried passion, aggression, and ignorance is probably going to surface. And, you might be fine with it. It just might be really difficult feelings. You might not buy into it necessarily. You just might notice that you really get upset when you're around other people who are idiots. Follow me? Some people are smiling, some people are not. Yes.
Sanho has a question.
Yes.
From Oklahoma.
Go
He
ahead.
asks, what's the relationship between freedom and choicelessness?
So they're both concepts. Freedom is more relative, of course. It's like freedom to do this, freedom to, you're not being locked up, so you're free to move around. It's a fairly simple situation, which Thomas Jefferson talked about it, but didn't really give it to his the people he owned. So, and then choicelessness just is something that you observe as choice until you see the fundamental nature that everything is choiceless. I don't care if you're completely nuts, insane, or if you're completely enlightened and the center of the universe and light rays are shining out of your head, keeping all the mosquitoes away. still choiceless. The idea of choice implies someone who makes choices. It's just incorrect. It's not like bad. It's just that things are choiceless. And the reason it makes it so difficult is, I'll show you. I'll say, if I want to reaffirm my self-centeredness, my ability to make choices, I can just go through any ritual, small. I can pick this up. Well, I'm not going to, because I have a choice. I can either pick this up or not pick this up. So it's what is this? What's happening here? It's a very limited area, a very selected area that we're doing something or not doing something. But, and you may be able to follow this, you may not. You may think it's incomplete. But I did not create this hand. I did not create that. I did not create the table it sits on. So all that was presented. Causes and conditions show up, and then you have this little tiny area where you have a little bit of movement where you can pick this up or not pick it up. But I can't take this and turn it into a turnip. I can't take this and make it vanish. Sanho? Yes.
In being free and well favored, what does it mean to be favored without someone who's favoring?
We're just talking about the polarity of you're well favored in that you, just to put it very simply, you hear the Dharma, you hear a little bit about the Dharma, you hear it from a teaching, if you hear it from a book, and something about that resonates with you. It might start out by being confusing. You might say, that can't be, that doesn't make any sense. Then you might come back and read it. You might ask someone else about it. And you might see that you're well favored. We're just saying it's a way of talking about each person's karma, to use the fancy Sanskrit word, is open enough that even though you might have confusion, you might have your hopes and fears and your own difficulties, still there's enough openness there that you're actually willing to include things that don't make much sense. But there's enough curiosity there. This is what happens in of the 6 realms which you've studied, the human realm. The difficulty with the human realm is intense passion and suffering, but also a lot of curiosity. The other realms are too busy with what they're dealing with. The hell realm with fighting, hungry ghost realm with getting stuff, addiction, and the animal realm with shutting down, and jealous God realm with getting somewhere, beating the other people, state of mind, and the God realm with, what's everybody making such a big deal out of everything for? I mean, I always use the example, I have a Harley in the garage, 2 Mercedes, my mate is beautiful, I have a lot of money, and what's everybody making such a big fuss? So I'm just saying it also can be a God realm in terms of some state of mind where someone just keeps maintaining some kind of state of being above everything and successful. And so, whereas the human realm, the curiosity there is very strong about what is happening? What is this? What is going on? What is it? It starts out with why questions, and if you continue, eventually will be what questions. The why questions, as I've said, are circular. Why? Because. Why? Because. You can find that. You can just spin and spin and spin. Because what you're doing is you're buying into relative truth, which is what? Relatively true. It's relatively true, but ultimate truth is what this teaching, spiritual path, is about. Ultimate truth. And ultimate truth does not abandon samsara, but it does not include samsara. It is not separate from samsara. But you have to see it. If you don't see it, then your own mind, I'm not just accusing anybody of anything. Maybe this isn't happening to you. Maybe I'm speaking to the Buddha. Maybe you're all Buddhists. I'm just going to check in to see if there's any. Yeah, there's a room full of Buddhas. Yeah. What can I say? Not much. You have a question?
What does it mean to be ill-favored?
Ill-favored? A good question. So ill-favored, using that kind of polarity, would be someone who And not because we're have the corner on the truth, so to speak. It's just a way of doing it. You might go to somewhere else and find some other kind of teaching that would also be supportive to help you transcend this world and see more deeply into what this world actually is. But the ill-favored part is someone who is so, closed down and tied up. I think of my parents, who, when I was very young, I remember thinking they really, I didn't have any word for it, but they have a lot of opinions. I remember that when I was very young, and I wasn't sure what that all was about. And I also noticed that you couldn't have a conversation with them. They just told you things. People who just tell you this and tell you. If you start to ask about something, they would just might even criticize you for even asking. Well, you ought to know that. Have you ever been treated that way? It's very uncomfortable.
They're always right.
Yeah, they're always right. Yeah, there's no discussion. No. So ill-favored would be, yes, being so. Well, look around the world and we see people who are, from the point of view of understanding, from a point of view of they don't even know they have a heart. I mean, they know they have a physical heart, but as I say, come up out. This is the fear place. Come up out of the gut into the heart. Drop down out of the paranoia into the heart. You won't know what's going on. If you know what's going on, this is confusion. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying you don't know how to walk through a doorway, or they have to have, as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, people are so spaced out, we need an enlightenment ward. I don't know where he said that, but he said it a few times. Mary.
I'm confused about if it's all choiceless.
Yeah.
Choiceless means, how do we get karma?
The karma is part of that. It's just things are, the very nature of karma is choicelessness. This happens, that happens, this causes that. But the thing that makes it difficult is to try to source any of that. You can't find a source. It's like the image I've often used is standing at the mouth of the Amazon and saying, where did this come from? It's one thing. It's just this big body of water. But if you go back, it's all these little things that have happened. I'm not here to promote past lives or anything like that, but something like that is going on. Before your birth, something else was happening that produces this kind of appearance, this a human being with, you already have, like when you talk to little tiny children, like Amalia, you notice there's a very definite kind of personality. It isn't like a little blank slate running around. No, they're very, very definitely, some children extremely peaceful and content all the time. My daughter was, my daughter and her mom, we often talk, we had several kids. We often said, well, if we just had Kateri, we would have thought, what's the big deal? I mean, she's like happy all the time. No, I don't know how. Kateri, I don't know how you're doing now. But she was just very delightful, sweet, cute. She was just kind of ideal. But then, but the boys, not to be against boys, but they were just, Mason, the boys. They were just kind of at war on some level all the time, some kind of a deal going on. So everyone comes into this world with so much. The word everybody uses is baggage, and it's not about getting rid of it. That's what makes it different than therapy, or different than some kinds of therapy, I should say, because there's hundreds of them. It's not about that, and it's about seeing it really, really deeply, and seeing it so deeply that you go down. I'm just using this as a metaphor. Go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you eventually will see that there isn't anyone having that. There's no ownership of anything. It's an astonishing thing to happen, and it's completely ordinary. You don't come out of it feeling superior to everybody. You come out of it knowing that you're not separate from anyone, anywhere. The most confused, terrible person is instead of seeing them as something to be against, what you see how deeply they're suffering, and that's why they're acting that way. This is how you meet someone who's just, or see someone on television, anywhere. You see how deeply, and you also see that you're kind of helpless. from the point of view of doing it, because the causes and conditions that have brought about this situation go back, well, if you want some years, how about a few thousand? You can't trace it down. Here's what you can do. Free and well favored, difficult to gain, easy to lose. Now I must do something meaningful. Find out who you are. If you find out who you are, don't even need Buddhism. Buddhism is a good support because it takes so much work. And so this sets up a structure, and you come in and you do kind of somewhat meaningless ritual over and over and over, which is about consciousness. It's not about worshiping anything. There isn't anything to worship. There isn't anything separate from anything else, so there's no worshiper and there's nothing to worship. But we set up the polarity so it makes it easier in this relative world to actually practice. It's not easy to come in here, and when more and more and more you're beginning to understand deep in your heart that this is empty of anything extra. Realizing that, but not quite being there, but slowly that starts to happen, that they can start to get more and more difficult. And it's very tempting to blame someone for the intensity that happens. If you're the Doan, you're leading the chant, you can be hitting that, and having done this hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times. At the same time you're doing this form, you see how you cannot repeat that form. It's always just slightly different tone, the different humidity in the room, different people in the room, different chanting. It's always different, yet we do it over and over and over again. It is about awareness. It's not about what occurs in the awareness. It's not about the clouds. It's about the sky. And even that is just a provisional teaching or a way of approaching it. So if everything is in motion, you want to find out the truth for yourself so you can find your own authority. Fundamentally, it's like you find your own authority, but what you find is there isn't any authority. But that doesn't mean you're an anarchist. It means that you are at rest and you're at peace, even though you might toss and turn in bed. Everything's included already. Yes.
How does finding out who you are make peace?
So when you find out who you are, you find out you're not separate from anyone. So this is actually seeing the Buddha everywhere. This is what the Buddha saw. Where he looked, he saw awakening. Everything was awake. So there's no opposite. There's no other that you need to get rid of. There's no other that you need to join or get. So the grasping, rejection, and the distraction have been resolved in perception only. This is the way it's taught in the Yogacara tradition. That everything you're perceiving, as long as there's a living being, and insofar as you have perception happening, that everything you're seeing is just a perception. It's not an object, and there's not a subject. But it has to be done. You can think about that. It even says that in Vasubandhu's 30 verses. You can talk about this, and you might be able to understand it. I can't quote him exactly, but he's kind of pointing out, just reading this and saying, yeah. It's not it. It has to be realized. You have to realize that everything that is happening is just perception. You're just perceiving.
So that's not real.
It's neither real nor is it unreal. It's not two. Everything comes together and it's not two. And it's totally. This is what when it starts feeling like you're showing by your expression, you start feeling it's ordinary magic. Trungpa Rinpoche talked about it. You can't change anything, but you can certainly see what it is. And if you see what it is, all the warfare, all the guns melt, all the weapons dissolve. You don't have to melt them. You don't. At first, it kind of feels like you're not taking ammunition to the front lines. You know that you're kind of fueling the aggression, and you somehow might find in your practice, or not, might find a way to stop doing that. And one of the ways it shows up is you feel the aggression, but you don't express it, and you have a willingness to feel aggression forever. It doesn't have to go away. And the magical part of it is if you stop fighting anything, it dissolves. And why? Not separate. You actually, the very thing you're fighting is you.
So what's there is what's there, and it's not necessarily
It's neither you or nor is it not you. It's not two, and that's why it's because we're so trapped in this relative situation. We're just, you know, it's how do we feel. I'm just saying, speaking on your behalf, somewhat. We feel like we have to understand it with the same understanding that I picked this up, I put this down, and it's not exactly that. That's the motion part. That's why it's so necessary to hold still and watch what moves, and because what is actually doing the observing is not separate from what you're observing, but you have to see it. It's,
choices,
yeah.
staying still.
Yes.
We gotta.
We got to go to the other. You can continue to ask questions and stay for daily Dharma gathering if you would like. But it starts in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll stand
Thank
and
you.
dedicate the merit in the back of our yellow chant books. I'd like to call everybody's attention to the donation boxes in the hallway for Sokuzan. Although the lock is broken, so you put money in. Please don't take it out.
May your merit penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san shi-fu, shi-sam-bu-sa-o-ku-sa, moko-ja-o-ro-mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all better ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light to protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.